Lieutenant George S. Patton, 1st Tank Brigade.
Brigadier General Douglas MacArthur, 42nd Infantry.
General, sir, they need you at the front.
All right, boys, let's move up!
Patton and MacArthur. Here they are in St. Mihiel, and they meet on the battlefield for the first time. In the midst of artillery shells all around them, so you have these two men who are going to play such an important role in shaping the future of the 20th century. And they have no idea what history has in store for them.
MacArthur is from a long line of military men. His father was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor in the American Civil War. No less is expected of his son.
Douglas MacArthur would lead attacks walking out into no man's land with a swagger. He was embodied with not only tremendous ability, but also tremendous self-confidence. From an early age, he was different. He was special. I don't want to say anointed, but he may have thought he was.
The two West Point graduates will be allies and rivals for decades.
I don't think there's any question that a leader who has experienced war and what it means to be in battle, if you're a military commander, that experience is invaluable. How you try to ensure that in the midst of all of that chaos and the killing that's going on, that you keep your eye on the mission that has to be accomplished. That's not easy to do.
The two men lead the Allies to victory as the German line crumbles. And for the first time, the Central Powers are on the run. Just 240 miles away, years of trench warfare have transformed Adolf Hitler from a directionless loner to a hardened soldier. Hitler has escaped death twice. And it's left him a changed man.
Hitler didn't feel at this time, during the First World War, that he was a man of destiny at all. What he did feel was a sense of belonging and a sense of commitment. And that, I think, made him braver than he might otherwise have been. He felt he was fighting in a really important cause, the cause of Germany.
Hitler's ideology takes root on the front lines. He begins to believe in Germany's superiority over the Allies, and is now certain he can withstand anything the Allied forces throw his way. The gas attacks are endless. To Hitler, they've become almost routine. But this time, it's different. The Allies hit the Germans with a deadly new form of chemical warfare: mustard gas. It lingers in the trenches for days and attacks both the respiratory system and the skin.
Mustard gas affects the central nervous system. It creates mustard-colored blisters on the skin. It blinds people. It strips away the mucous membranes. It's incredibly painful and debilitating. And since it had no odor, by the time you realized that you had inhaled it and it was on your skin, it was too late.
After 3 years of bloody war, the stalemate in Europe has been broken. The United States has joined the fighting, giving Allied armies the needed boost. And driving the Germans back to their original defensive line in northern France. But the German army remains powerful, meaning the Allies have to act fast. Brigadier General Douglas MacArthur is seeking every tactical advantage.
Military leaders are human beings that are remarkably different in personality and background. Every so often, someone crosses the constellation of military leaders a little bit like a shooting star. And Douglas MacArthur did that.
MacArthur learns of a surveillance photograph of German trenches along the Western Front that reveals an undetected gap in the German line. Where others see an unbreakable defense, MacArthur knows he can exploit that weakness.
Intelligence is essential, and the more you can get, the better. But at the end of the day, it's your instinct as a senior person. The reason we're wearing stars or have these elevated positions is that we have demonstrated over the years our ability to have an instinct that works.
MacArthur is determined to break through the line and surround the Germans in their trenches. Supported by George S. Patton and his battalion of tanks. In the fall of 1918,
Come on!
the Allies launch an all-out attack and what will come to be known as the 100 Days Offensive. Boosted by MacArthur's men and Patton's tanks, the Allied armies become the most dominant fighting force the war has ever seen.
Press forward!
Both of them had big egos, but there's no doubt that both of them were brilliant on the battlefield.
Good! Keep advancing!
MacArthur was an extraordinarily talented and effective military leader.
Fire!
Patton, for what he was asked to do, which was trying to break out of the trenches, there's probably nobody better.
Move! Come on! Move! Into that! Move!
The Allies relentlessly attacked the German line from every direction. After months of fighting, the Allies finally break through, putting the mighty German army on the run. Finally, with no other option, tens of thousands of German soldiers lay down their guns and surrender.
You look at the great leaders, these are men who understood the most important resource they had available to them to fight a war. Not the weapons, not the planes, not the tanks. It's the soldiers who get it done. And leadership is all about inspiring your soldiers to achieve a decisive win.
After 4 years of continuous fighting and 37 million casualties, the two sides agree to a ceasefire.
When the world is shaking and rearranging itself, as it does after great events like the end of a war, there are a whole range of different emotions. The first is exhilaration, a very personal feeling, exhilaration at being part of an event that is changing the world. And there's never much time to look back. There's always a lot to look forward to.
While most of the world celebrates the end of the fighting, some, deep in the heart of Germany, refuse to accept defeat.
Hitler was wounded in a gas attack at the very end of the war, and he was then hospitalized, temporarily blinded.
There are people who will be losing war against the Western armies.
While he was in hospital, he was then told that Germany had lost the First World War. And that's a crucial turning point in Hitler's life.
In Hitler's worldview, it was always dead or alive. Win or total defeat. For him, surrender was something un-German. You are a coward somehow if you surrender.
Over a 30-year period, from 1914 to 1945, more than 100 million people will die in the bloodiest conflict the world has ever seen. But it all began in the slums of Vienna. At age 25, Adolf Hitler is a poor loner and aspiring artist, struggling to survive. Both his parents are dead, leaving Hitler truly alone in the world.
He was a lost soul. He wanted to be an artist, but he couldn't get into the art school, and he ended up living in a flop house.
His only way to make money is selling paintings around town for next to nothing.
Hitler didn't have a plan B when he was rejected. He just didn't know what to do, so he started to drift. He had very little money. He was living a hand-to-mouth existence. He had no clear aim in life at all. He was, in a sense, waiting for something to happen.
Before long, a chance event 450 miles away will change everything. June 28, 1914. An assassin takes down the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. The murder ignites a deadly conflict that quickly erupts into war. From the tangle of alliances, two sides emerge. Britain, France, and Russia become known as the Allies, while Austria-Hungary, Germany, and the Ottoman Empire form the Central Powers. Filled with a patriotic sense of urgency, men on both sides rush to join the fight. For Hitler, it's the opportunity he's been waiting for. He quickly rushes to enlist.
He tried out for the Austrian army. He failed the physical. He wasn't considered strong enough to carry a rifle.
Rejected by his own country, Hitler turns to the German army, who's accepting almost anyone, as they work to build the largest fighting force in the world. He has finally given Hitler what he's always wanted: a place to belong.
I think that the decision to enter the military for most people is not a decision to serve. It may be in a very general sense, but it's more often because something else is motivating you.
Throughout August of 1914, Hitler trains as a private in the German army.
Well, the German army was considered to be the finest army in the world. It was a massive force, well-equipped, well-trained, and very well led, and Hitler was swept away. Being part of the German army was something that Hitler deeply loved.
The structure of training transforms Hitler into a devout German soldier. Hitler joins 1.5 million Germans marching towards the French border and the unified Allied forces. In the history of warfare, armies this large have never met in combat. 6,000 miles away, America has nothing to do with the war in Europe. They're in their own war with Pancho Villa. The Mexican revolutionary is carrying out violent attacks on U.S. citizens along the southwestern border. But he goes too far. Villa and his men seize an American mining train, brutally killing 16 innocent Americans, leaving the U.S. military no choice but to take action. Nearly 5,000 American troops cross the Mexican border to take down Villa. But fighting a guerrilla force with a traditional army is next to impossible. Determined to find a different way is George S. Patton.
Patton's ancestors fought in the Revolutionary War. They fought in the Civil War. He grew up wanting to be a military hero. He has a reputation for being smart, tough, and for being ruthless. But he had another quality that's essential in military leadership. He understands the power of technology, and he doesn't want to fight with cavalry and with horses. He's looking for a new technology that will change the nature of the battlefield. So the car is fairly new. If you strap a gun to a car, you've got a new instrument of warfare.
What Patton doesn't know is that he's about to revolutionize warfare.
I think Patton knew only one direction, and that was forward. He had a lot of charisma. He was a very colorful leader. I thought he was very egotistical. And that's fine as long as you translate that into good leadership, but maybe a little bit over the top.
Almost immediately, Patton is able to put his plan into action. And he launches a surprise raid on Pancho Villa's camp. The bandits are no match for Patton and his mobile army. And by the end of the fight, 3 of Villa's men have been killed, including his second in command. The first use of motorized warfare by the United States Army is a huge success. And for Patton, it's the first step in his rise to greatness, and the first major war with modern technology.
Look at World War I, it's about machine guns and, all of these sorts of new killing mechanisms. It's the beginning of the 20th century as a tech era. This is not men on horseback anymore. This is a motorized war.
The advanced weaponry turns the conflict into a slaughter. 230 men are killed each hour. One death every 15 seconds.
Really, the machine gun probably did more than anything else. They found that if they dug even shallow trenches and used machine guns, a small number of troops could stop a large attacking force. And then both sides started to dig trenches. And so they were locked along this line, the Western Front, which was this extraordinarily complex set of trenches that didn't move very much either way.
The trenches cover 25,000 miles. Laid end to end, they would circle the globe. The area between the trenches is so deadly as no man's land.
And he has Adolf Hitler in his sights. And even though he's a trained soldier, he can't bring himself to pull the trigger. The Germans are retreating. Adolf Hitler's been injured. And he has this encounter with Private Henry Tandy, a British private. Tandy had pulled the trigger. Adolf Hitler would have died on the battlefields in World War I. And the whole course of human history would have been changed. It's one of the great what-ifs in history.
The other side can't move us out. They can move us backwards a little bit, but only at horrendous cost. And as a result of this, the war just bogged down in the muds of northern France.
One man is convinced he can break the stalemate.
He comes up to the barman and says, I would like a...
Born into one of the wealthiest families in Britain, he's risen through the ranks at unusual speed to become the head of the British Navy. His name is Winston Churchill.
Churchill had the most enormous self-confidence, and it's easy to see why that was the case. He was the son of Lord Randolph Churchill, who was a brilliant politician. And so Churchill, from a very young man, saw himself, almost by divine right, as playing a leading role in politics.
Churchill forms a bold plan that he's certain will change the Allies' fortunes.
He, even at that point, considered himself a strategist. And he looked for ways to break the stalemate in Western Europe rather than just to get more armies and more artillery. And it actually is fairly thoughtful.
What if we could send the fleet to the south, into the Black Sea?
Resupply the Russians?
Oh, yes, exactly.
But there's no way.
Oh, yes, there is. Through Gallipoli.
Gallipoli? No.
This is our way in.
With all due respect, we are here to provide
This is what we are doing.
A lot of the people Churchill worked with thought he was a man of contradictions, a maverick, a loose cannon. He was known as someone to watch. His friends would say someone to watch because he's very talented, and his enemies would say someone to watch because he's dangerous.
The Gallipoli Peninsula is heavily guarded by the Central Powers. Churchill's plan is to blast through the narrow strait, pushing through to Russia, and allowing the Allies to launch an overwhelming attack from the east, opening up a second front against Germany. If it's successful, the Allies will be able to turn the tide of the war and crush the Central Powers. More than 100 warships set sail for what will be the largest amphibious invasion the world has ever seen.